Chapter 528. Who is he? Lin Chia was wearing a white lab coat and had just stepped out of the corridor when a figure approached him. Nix was dressed in a starry silk gown, walking slowly towards him. Even though she was holding a bundle of black yarn and knitting needles in her arms, it couldn't hide the noble aura that emanated from her. Upon seeing Lin Chia, a gentle smile appeared on her lips. "Good morning, mother," Lin Chia greeted with a smile. "Good morning, I was just looking for you, Danaduz. Is something wrong?" Lin Chia was taken aback. "Come with me and you'll find out soon," Nix said with a warm smile, leading Lin Chia towards the other end of the corridor. Lin Chia hesitated for a moment as he was planning to interrogate the seeker in the basement, but he eventually stepped forward to follow her. The two ascended the stairs and walked straight into Nix's hospital room. Nix entered the room, placed the knitting needles on the table, and then unfolded the bundle of black yarn, shaking it in the sunlight. It was only at this moment that Lin Chia saw the full appearance of the yarn. It was a black knitted coat. For a long time, Nix had hardly spoken to those bottles and jars, nor did she sit alone in the rocking chair in a daze. Perhaps last year she had started with a ball of black yarn. Every day she would sit in the yard basking in the sun while knitting. Like a leisurely noblewoman. At first, Lin Chia thought she was just looking for something to pass the time, but now that the coat was before him, he stood frozen in place. "This is for me?" Lin Chia looked up at Nix upon seeing the familiar size. Nix smiled slightly, holding the shoulder seam of the coat and bringing it in front of Lin Chia, seriously comparing it to his figure. "Yes," Nix replied with a smile. "Isn't it natural for a mother to knit a piece of clothing for her child?" Lin Chia stared blankly at Nix for a while, then lowered his gaze to the knitted coat in front of him, feeling a warm current rise within him. The last person to knit clothes for him was his aunt. It was probably when he was 7 or 8 years old. At that time his aunt had just divorced, and to support him and Aijin she had taken frugality to the extreme. Every winter after they fell asleep she would sit by the window knitting clothes little by little in the dim light. Although the clothes weren't particularly beautiful, they were very comfortable and gave a sense of inexplicable security. Lin Chia had never seen his mother and didn't know what she looked like. All his understanding of maternal love came from his aunt. But now he felt that familiar and intoxicating warmth once again from this gentle, smiling woman before him. "The size is perfect. Next it's time to bind off." Nix nodded in satisfaction, folding the knitted coat and setting it aside. "Thank you, mother," Lin Chia said sincerely. "No need to say thank you, Danaduz. You are my child and I have said that I am willing to do anything for you," Nix said gently. "Or if you have time, would you like to stay for lunch?" Lin Chia hesitated for a moment. "I might not be able to today. I have an important assessment later." "That's okay then, next time," Nix smiled. "Go on with your own business. I assume you didn't come back just for a stroll, did you?" Feeling a bit embarrassed, Lin Chia scratched his head. "Then I'll get going." He turned and left room 1, heading straight for the director's office. Nix stood alone in the corridor watching Lin Chia's departing figure, letting out a soft sigh. "Why not just tell him directly to stay and accompany you a little longer?" Merlin leaned against the door of the study, holding a thermos, and spoke calmly. Nix shook her head. "He has his own things to attend to. I can't keep him bound to my side forever." "But your time is also running out." Merlin glanced at her, his eyes radiating a mysterious glow. "You can hardly suppress it any longer, can you?" Nix, draped in her starry silk gown, stood quietly in place, silent. "You've managed to suppress it until now, which is already quite remarkable. One could say you are indeed one of the creators of India." Merlin paused. "However, weaving part of your divine power into clothing for him will damage your soul. When it comes time to reshape your divine body, you won't be able to return to your peak state." "I don't care." Nix slowly spoke, a faint sadness flashing in her eyes. Then her expression gradually became resolute. "I only have him left as my child." She turned to look at Merlin. "Don't forget our agreement." Merlin sighed, rubbing his increasingly sparse hair, muttering to himself, "After taking care of it for so long, it's all going to waste." Lin Chia, wearing black-framed glasses, walked through one dark and narrow cell after another, finally stopping in front of a particular cell. Inside the cell, a shadow stood quietly in the center, a crimson eye raised above its head, watching Lin Chia outside the cage, a hint of a smile appearing in its gaze. It slightly bent forward, placing its right hand on its chest, bowing respectfully. Director Lin, you finally came to see me. Hearing this title, Lin Chia narrowed his eyes. You knew about this place long ago and were well aware that after being killed by me, your soul would come here. So you chose to hide in the world for 12 years only to appear at this moment. Your purpose is this place, isn't it? Indeed, no secret can escape your eyes. The shadow with the crimson eye did not deny it. How did you know about this place? Lin Chia stared at the shadow, his expression serious. The existence of the Divine Mental Hospital had always been his secret. He had never told anyone. If that was the case, how did it know about this place? Moreover, it even knew that its soul would come here after being killed. If it weren't for an accidental discovery, even Lin Chia, who had just taken control of the hospital, wouldn't have known this. The most crucial point is that 12 years ago, Lin Chia hadn't even been chosen by the Seraphim, and the Divine Hospital hadn't appeared in his mind. Back then he was just an ordinary elementary school student. Did it already know all of this back then? All my actions are guided by a great existence, the shadow with the crimson eye spoke respectfully. Before I descended into this world, he had already arranged everything. I just need to follow his guidance and do what I am supposed to do. Who is he? Chapter 529. I won. I can't tell you his name yet. That's his instruction, the red-eyed shadow said earnestly. But you don't need to worry because he is completely on your side. Even if the whole world is against you, he will always stand by you. Lin Chia frowned slightly. He didn't like the feeling of being led by the nose. The he mentioned by the red-eyed shadow seemed to have seen through everything, even including him in his game. Although it repeatedly claimed that he wouldn't harm him, the feeling that his fate was somehow being controlled by someone else made him very uncomfortable. Who are you? Are we that familiar? On what basis do you think I won't let your soul be completely extinguished here? Lin Chia said darkly. If he thinks he understands everything, what if I just want to disrupt his plans? You won't, the red-eyed shadow replied calmly. Because I will use a piece of information to buy my life. Lin Chia raised an eyebrow. You're that confident this piece of information will move me? Why don't you listen first? Lin Chia stared calmly into its eyes, waiting for it to continue. In the cell, the red-eyed shadow stepped forward, coming to stand before Lin Chia. It reached out a hand and gently tapped Lin Chia's chest. That crimson eye gazed into Lin Chia's eyes. It slowly spoke. He is going to die. Lin Chia froze in place. On the plane, Lin Chia suddenly opened his eyes wide. He reached out a hand to touch his chest. His fingertips brushed against something hard, causing him to shudder slightly. After a moment he pulled out a wooden chopstick from his pocket. Staring at the chopstick, Lin Chia stood frozen like a statue. In the mist. In the city of ghostly light. Deafening explosions echoed from the sky, and the entire broken city floating in the air trembled violently. Dust fell from the top of the parking lot, landing on the burning furnace below. The sound of distant buildings collapsing thundered like rolling thunder in the air, while outside the ghostly barrier, green and sword lights flashed in the clouds. A heart-stopping pressure filled the air. Senior Qin, what's going on? Lu Yu stared blankly at the sky above. Qin Han looked at the flickering sword light in shock and uncertainly said, This should be a divine battle? That person is fighting the wind god? Lu Yu's mouth fell open. Then Qin Han gazed at the sky for a long time before slowly speaking. He should be the sword saint of the great Xia, the pinnacle of humanity. No one could confront the gods except for the pinnacle of humanity. But the question was, why would the sword saint be in Anta County? Was it a coincidence? Or Qin Han suddenly thought of a possibility, his eyes filled with shock as he looked at the figure in the sky. How could the sword saint be here? Was he already in Anta County for something? Lu Yu asked in confusion, then shook his head to himself. No, if the sword saint was here, the wind god wouldn't have been able to successfully abduct us from the mist in the first place. Qin Han's lips trembled as he said hoarsely. He came through the mist to save us. Boom, boom, boom. From the ghostly sky, a series of terrifying sounds erupted, and a blinding sword light swept across the horizon, tearing the sky apart like a blazing sun. The chilling sword energy surged through the air like waves, and even with the ghostly light of Fengdu obscuring it, it was impossible to look directly at it. Chen Han and Lu Yu both lowered their heads, turning their gazes away from the sky, their expressions filled with worry. Due to the ghostly light limiting their vision, they couldn't see the battle in the sky at all, only able to judge who had the upper hand through the sword intent or the gusts of wind swirling in the air. The moment the sword light appeared, the wind god's pressure was completely suppressed. Then with a loud bang the entire broken city lost its support and began to plummet rapidly. A strong sense of weightlessness enveloped everyone's minds. The furnaces scattered in the underground parking lot began to float upwards, and the vehicles on the street also hovered in the air. Chen Han and Lu Yu both grabbed onto nearby pillars, their hearts racing. If they fell from this height, the city, along with all the lives here, would be shattered into pieces. At that moment, the entire city trembled again, and all the floating objects returned to their original positions. Fortunately, the weightlessness didn't last long. Although debris was scattered, the residents lying on the ground unconscious were unharmed. The cars that had been airborne crashed down heavily, and the blaring alarms pierced the silence of the city, echoing in the darkness. Chen Han and Lu Yu both got up from the ground, anxiously looking up at the sky. Above the ghostly light, the fierce clash of green and sword lights had completely vanished, and everything returned to calm as if nothing had just happened. Senior Chen, did the sword saint win or lose? Lu Yu asked uncertainly. Chen Han shook his head. I don't know either. The two stood quietly at the entrance of the parking lot, the flashlight beams sweeping across the dark street, hoping to see that figure in the black robe and backpack once more. In the silence, a tense atmosphere spread through the air. The sword saint must not be in trouble. They prayed silently. Suddenly, a series of urgent and weak coughs came from the end of the street. Cough, 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 cough. Both turned their heads to look, and in the darkness at the end of the road, a figure covered in blood was staggering toward them. His black shirt had been slashed open in several places, horrifying bloodstains covered his body, and his blood-soaked black hair was disheveled over his forehead. He lowered his head, coughing violently, his face pale as a ghost. His hands were empty, trembling uncontrollably. His sword was missing. Senior Sword Saint! Lu Yu exclaimed in surprise upon seeing the figure, then quickly ran over with Chen Han to support him. Chen Han's hand gripped Zhou Ping's wrist. A surge of white light flowed from his body into the Sword Saint's wounds, and his expression instantly turned serious. Senior Sword Saint, your injuries. Chen Han looked into Zhou Ping's eyes, seemingly wanting to say something. Cough, 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 cough. Zhou Ping coughed violently a few times, his lips turning pale. He waved his hand and said hoarsely, I'm fine. Senior Sword Saint, who won in the end, you or the Wind God? Lu Yu couldn't help but ask. Zhou Ping was silent for a moment. He retreated. So, I guess that means I won. Lu Yu's eyes widened in disbelief upon hearing this. Although he had been praying for this outcome, when Zhou Ping said it himself, he was still shocked beyond measure. The Sword Saint forced back the Wind God? That was a genuine Egyptian nine-pillar god. An existence capable of uprooting half a city with a single gesture and then passing through the mist to return to the Egyptian Sun City. Was he really still human? Senior Sword Saint, then what do we do now? Lu Yu stammered. Zhou Ping raised his pale face, calmly gazing toward the east. Go home. Chapter 530. The one behind, did you say he's going to die? What's going on? Lin Chia stood in front of the cell of the seer, one hand gripping the railing, his brow furrowed. The shadow with crimson eyes shook its head. I'm not sure about the specifics. Aren't you able to foresee the future? I can only see the future of a single object within a week, and only the events that object experiences. It's not indiscriminate foresight. Lin Chia's gaze sharpened slightly. Are you telling the truth? I swear by the name of the Supreme Master I serve. Can the future be changed? It can, the crimson-eyed shadow nodded slightly. My Eye of Secrets does not predict the future in an absolute sense. It merely extrapolates possibilities. When the predetermined trajectory of events is disrupted, the future will change accordingly. So, as long as someone intervenes, he might not die? Theoretically, yes, but it's not that simple. The shadow gestured in the air and several black threads appeared out of nowhere. The existence of all things has its original predetermined trajectory, Some call it fate, others call it destiny. Assuming these threads represent the fate of all things, the thickness of the fate threads varies for different objects and lives. For example, a reptile has very thin fate threads. To illustrate, it should be born on a Monday and accidentally stepped on by a passerby on Sunday. To intervene in its fate, one only needs to make the passerby walk a second earlier or later. The cost of intervening in its fate thread is minimal. However, the closer one is to the limits of existence, the thicker their fate threads become, as their actions can influence thousands of lives and even the laws of the world. Changing the fate of such beings requires a significant cost. If the power intervening in their fate is not strong enough to completely shake that fate thread, the world itself will correct the timeline and the future will not change. After hearing this, Lin Chia fell into deep thought. You're saying that the world itself has a self-correcting function, and if the power to intervene in fate does not match the cost required, then even if fate is changed in the short term, it will be pulled back into alignment by the timeline? Now it was the crimson-eyed Shadow's turn to be stunned. You actually understood? Was it difficult? Lin Chia raised an eyebrow. To change fate, one must pay a price. It's merely another form of conservation. When that great being explained this theory to me, it took me a long time to grasp its meaning. The Shadow sighed. You truly are remarkable, Director Lin. Now can I stay in this hospital? The Shadow's gaze was fixed on Lin Chia, filled with expectation and sincerity. Lin Chia pondered for a moment. You can, but I have one more question. You said that as long as it doesn't involve that great being, I can answer. 12 years ago when you descended upon Songnan, what did you do? Lin Chia's eyes narrowed slightly. The crimson-eyed Shadow paused, hesitated for a moment, then slowly spoke. Following the guidance of that great being, I found a little girl on the outskirts of Songnan City. A little girl? Yes, about 7 or 8 years old. Her name is Jin Yan. Hearing this name, Lin Chia's heart stirred. He was not unfamiliar with this name. It was the signature at the end of the letter he found in the director's office of the Asylum of the Gods. If nothing went awry, she was the previous director of this asylum. And then? Lin Chia asked. Then I gave her a letter from that great being, along with a formation diagram. What did the letter say? That great being didn't allow me to see the contents of the letter, so I don't know what it said, but... The Shadow paused. I did see the formation diagram. It's called the Three Saints Spirit Communication Formation, which can break the constraints of time and space in a short period by using 3 artifacts imbued with the power of laws, allowing one to act from any point in the past or future within the coverage of the formation. 3 artifacts? In an instant, Lin Chia recalled the 3 artifacts that Jin Yan had won. According to the sage, after Songnan was erased by the wrath of Shiva 12 years ago, the night watchman unearthed fragments of 3 artifacts from the underground of the low house where Lin Chia was at that time. The reason young Lin Chia survived the erasure might be related to these 3 artifacts. Combining this with the information just provided by the crimson-eyed Shadow, Lin Chia began to vaguely piece together the reason for his survival. 12 years ago, the crimson-eyed Shadow descended upon the Great Xia according to the will of the great being it served and found the previous director of the Asylum of the Gods, Jin Yan, making some kind of transaction with her through the letter. Thus, Jin Yan came to that low house in advance, secretly setting up the Three Saints Spirit Communication Formation underground, implanting the Asylum of the Gods into Lin Chia's mind. When the wrath of Shiva erased Songnan, the Three Saints Spirit Communication Formation activated, and that being acted from across the river of time, preserving itself from the erasure. Then the Seraph chose him to become the agent of the divine. A vast amount of divine power was poured into Lin Chia's mind, awakening the Asylum of the Gods hidden deep within his consciousness. However, due to Lin Chia's weak mental power, he was unable to sense the existence of the asylum for several years. It wasn't until a few years later, when his mental power grew strong enough for him to see the asylum, that subsequent events unfolded. Putting it all together, the being behind the crimson-eyed Shadow not only preserved its own life under the wrath of Shiva but also allowed Lin Chia to obtain the Asylum of the Gods and become the agent of the Seraph. Without that being, Lin Chia would never have grown to this point. He should have been completely erased along with Songnan 12 years ago. At this moment, Lin Chia recalled the theory of fate threads that the crimson-eyed Shadow had just mentioned. If the erasure of the entire city was the fate Lin Chia was originally meant to have, then the being behind the crimson-eyed shadow not only changed his fate but also altered his future to an utterly unpredictable extent. What kind of price did that being pay to achieve all this? Why did they do it? Lin Chia couldn't understand. The only explanation he could think of was what the crimson-eyed shadow had said at the beginning. Because they and you are on the same side, even if the whole world stands against you, they will always stand by your side. Chapter 531, 007. Lin Chia still held a skeptical attitude towards the trustworthiness of this statement. However, he could temporarily confirm that the existence behind the crimson-eyed shadow did not harbor any malice towards him. After coming to this realization, Lin Chia's attitude towards the crimson-eyed shadow softened considerably. He nodded and pulled out a labor contract from the void, handing it over to the shadow. The crimson-eyed shadow showed no hesitation, not even glancing at the terms, and directly signed its name. The ancient contract automatically ignited in the air, and the cell that imprisoned the crimson-eyed shadow slowly opened. A blue caregiver uniform was draped over the shadow, and a nameplate on the chest of the uniform gleamed brightly. 007. The crimson-eyed shadow glanced at the uniform it was wearing, a hint of joy appearing in its eyes as it deeply bowed to Lin Chia. Director Lin, caregiver number 007 is at your service. Do you have a name? Please bestow a name upon me, Director Lin. Lin Chia's gaze fell on the crimson-eyed pupils, pondering for a moment. From now on you shall be called Heitong. Thank you, Director. Go out and get to know the other caregivers and patients. I have other matters to attend to. Lin Chia waved his hand at Heitong. Heitong nodded slightly and stepped towards the upper floor. After taking just 2 steps, he paused, hesitated for a moment, and then spoke up. Director Lin, that person is entangled with too many things. His fate is very tightly woven. To change his destiny, the cost is something you cannot afford. Lin Chia was very clear about who he referred to. Zhou Ping was the pinnacle of humanity, the highest combat power of the Great Xia. To alter his fate, one must pay an equivalent price. Heitong did not want Lin Chia to take risks. After all, he was the chosen one of that existence. Lin Chia did not turn back. He simply walked 2 steps forward, his white coat swaying gently, and he vanished from the spot. Shangjing City. The rain fell incessantly. This prosperous and magnificent city was the heart of the Great Xia and its political center. Even with the gloomy and cold weather, the roads remained congested, and everywhere one looked there were pedestrians. The flames of civilization and technology burned brightly in the rain, igniting the entire city. A low rumble of thunder echoed from the clouds. Cold, piercing raindrops struck the car windows as a long black Lincoln slowly navigated through the traffic. So this is Shangjing, Chao Yuan murmured as he gazed out the window. Brother Zhui, do you regret it? Bai Li Pangpang looked at Shin Qingzhu. If it weren't for that incident at Jinan Mountain, you would have been a member of the 006 team in Shangjing for 2 years now. Shin Qingzhu sat on a leather sofa, glanced out the window and calmly replied. I am who I am, there are no ifs, nor do I need them. Bai Li Pangpang shrugged. All right then. There's only one last match left and this comprehensive education will be completely over, Bai Li Pangpang murmured. I wonder if Sword Saint has written to the 006 team. I think he has, and Qingyu said. However, the 006 team is the leader of the National Night Watch teams, aside from special teams. Sword Saint's letter might have some impact on them but not too much. Definitely not the warm welcome like the 007 team received, Chao Yuan added. A proper duel isn't bad either. While everyone was chatting, Lin Chia, who had been sitting quietly with his eyes closed, slowly opened them. I have something to say. His voice was serious. Everyone immediately quieted down and turned to look at Lin Chia. What's wrong, Chia? Bai Li Pangpang asked. Lin Chia's gaze swept over everyone and after a moment of silence he slowly spoke. Sword Saint is going to have an incident. Shangjing City. 006 Team's base. Yuan Gang, dressed in military uniform and holding a document, walked steadily and decisively to the office door. Knock knock knock. He lightly tapped on the door. Come in, a voice floated from inside. Yuan Gang pushed the door open and entered. The office had a traditional Chinese style with simple and elegant furniture. A large desk was piled high with thick stacks of documents, resembling a small mountain. Behind the mountain of documents, a man lazily sat up from a recliner, a cross-shaped scar on his forehead. Captain, those kids have arrived in Shangjing. Yuan Gang stood tall in front of the desk, his voice deep and resonant. Xiaopinga raised an eyebrow, seemingly recalling something. Oh, the 5th Reserve team mentioned in Sword Saint's letter? That's right. Have the venues for the matches been arranged? All set. As for the timing, there's a special operation this afternoon, and there are still 2 mysterious incidents that haven't been resolved, so it's scheduled for tomorrow morning at 9. Yuan Gang glanced at the schedule and said. Good. Xiaopinga nodded. Just as Sword Saint's letter said, we won't intervene. Let the remaining 7 team members face them. By the way, didn't you say that more than half of them are your students? Yuan Gang smiled. Yes, Lin Chia, Bai Li Peng Peng, Chao Yuan, Shin Qingzhu. These 4 are from 2 years ago, and Jiang Er was the top student from last year. Xiaopinga chuckled lightly. Old Yuan, it seems you've trained a few remarkable talents again. This is already the 2nd special team you've produced, right? They only qualify as a special team after passing this test, Yuan Gang said seriously. I won't go easy on them. I knew you'd say that. Xiaopinga reclined back in the chair and spoke leisurely. But after all, you have a teacher-student bond. Aren't you going to invite them out for a drink and reminisce? Yuan Gang hesitated for a moment, sighed and said, Forget it. There are too many things on my plate. Where would I find the time to drink? Xiaopinga glanced at him and silently covered his face with a document. You're just too rigid. You approach everything with rules. While that's a good thing in terms of work, it's not good for your mindset. At our level, mindset is the key to further progress. Do what you want. This earth won't stop spinning just because you're not here. The Night Watch has so many talents. Do you think it would collapse without you, Yuan Gang? Yuan Gang stood frozen in place. But these documents are teamwork. If I don't do them, will you? As soon as he finished speaking, Yuan Gang shook his head to himself. No way. If I leave it to you, the entire Night Watch will probably collapse by tomorrow. Under the documents, Xiaopinga's mouth twitched slightly. He cursed silently, threw the document on the table and stood up. Yuan Gang, I'm the captain of the Shangjing team, yet when it comes from your mouth, it sounds like I'm a lazy good-for-nothing. Go drink. I don't believe it. With this little work I can't manage it. Chapter 532, The 9 Pillar Gods. In the midst of the mist. Egypt. The blazing sun hung in the sky like a roaring fireball, radiating endless light and heat in the stillness. Amidst the hazy fog, an ancient city floated above the heavens. Here it felt as if the sun was within reach. This ancient city was built entirely from heavy, dark yellow bricks, shining brilliantly under the sunlight, gleaming like gold bricks. Towering stone structures stood on the clouds, their architectural craftsmanship far exceeding human comprehension. Any one of these buildings, if placed on Earth, would be enough to astonish the world as a miracle. This ancient city, suspended beneath the sun, was the homeland of the Egyptian gods, the City of the Sun. At this moment, at the highest point in the center of the City of the Sun, an immense circular plaza, seemingly boundless, floated within the city. The surface of the plaza was densely covered with intricate patterns, profoundly mysterious. As the sun's rays fell upon the plaza, those patterns seemed to come alive, pulsating slowly like veins. At the edge of the grand plaza, 9 blinding pillars of light stood tall and imposing. On the horizon, a blue whirlwind swept in, carrying clouds and mist, rolling in like a tidal wave. In the center of the whirlwind, a figure dressed in a cyan and white robe, with a golden belt around his waist, emerged. His body was covered in sword scars, and even his robe was torn into several pieces, looking utterly disheveled. He stepped onto the edge of the City of the Sun, and in the next moment appeared atop one of the 9 pillars. The surface of this pillar revealed numerous swirling patterns of blue wind. This was the god pillar symbolizing wind. As his figure appeared atop the pillar, silhouettes began to emerge from the other pillars as well. In total, 6 figures stood atop the 9 pillars. Su, a vague figure atop the sun pillar, slowly spoke. What about the Fengdu of the Great Xia? On the wind pillar, the battered Su hesitated for a moment. It was taken away. Upon hearing these 4 words, the eyes of the other gods narrowed slightly. Who took it? Asgard or Olympus? Neither. Su shook his head. It was the Great Xia. The Great Xia. Set, the god of sand, frowned. From the information transmitted before Osiris's death, apart from that emperor of Fengdu, the other gods of the Great Xia shouldn't be able to act. It wasn't a god of the Great Xia. It was a human with a sword. A human. Except for the central sun god, the other pillar gods were taken aback, then couldn't help but laugh, their eyes filled with mockery. Su, after cultivating your divine status for such a long time, you couldn't even defeat a human in the end? The Fengdu you had was taken away and you were driven to flee by a human. Su, you've embarrassed all of us 9 pillar gods. It seems that next year, the number of statues you offer in the human circle will be cut by more than half. Su, do you even deserve to call yourself a child of the sun? The mocking voices came from the other god pillars. Su frowned, a fierce anger igniting in his eyes, his fists clenched tightly. Enough. He roared, and the mighty divine might of the wind god surged forth, sweeping over the other gods. That human is very strong. Even if you encountered him, you wouldn't win. In the next moment, several divine mights erupted across the plaza, colliding with the wind god's might, and angry shouts came from the various god pillars. Su, are you trying to rebel? As gods, how could we possibly lose to a human? A ridiculous excuse. Shut up. The vague figure atop the sun god pillar suddenly spoke, and a powerful divine might descended, shattering the rampant divine pressures in the plaza into fragments. The other gods immediately fell silent. The vague figure slightly turned, its gaze landing on Su, who felt a weight on his shoulder and lowered his head. Osiris perished under the laws of the Great Xia. Losing is not shameful, and he provided us with important information before his death. But you, Su, lost to a human, letting Fengdu slip away, causing Osiris's efforts to go to waste. Without Fengdu, Osiris cannot be resurrected, and the reincarnation laws of the Great Xia cannot be broken. Without that segment of the Great Xia's dragon vein, Amon's curse on the national fortune of the Great Xia cannot be implemented. We lost 2 crucial trump cards for conquering the Great Xia, all because of you. Do you understand your mistake? Su opened his mouth, seemingly wanting to say something, but after hesitating for a moment he still lowered his head. I understand my mistake. Seeing Su admit his fault, the vague figure atop the sun god pillar nodded slightly and continued. That fragment of the city is crucial to our ability to conquer the Great Xia. It absolutely cannot return to the territory of the Great Xia. Since that human protecting the Great Xia is strong, to be safe, Set, you and Su will go back together to retrieve that fragment and bring Amon along. Once you obtain that fragment, immediately begin the curse on the national fortune. This time, we absolutely cannot afford to fail. Amon was not one of the 9 pillar gods but one of the 8 primordial gods of Egypt, also residing in the city of the sun. Set, the god of sand, and Su both nodded simultaneously. We will obey the sun's holy decree. The vague figure atop the sun god pillar turned to the other pillars. Tefnut, Geb, Nut, Isis, the 4 of you will attack the Great Xia's borders from one direction together. Do not scatter. If you do, it will be easy for those Great Xia people to find ways to trap you one by one and delay time. But do not go too deep, just destroy a dozen or so cities on the border. If you directly strike into the core area of the Great Xia, awakening the Great Xia gods who are still repairing the Great Way, they may not hesitate to shatter the Great Way and perish with us. If they send anyone to support that fragment, you can directly cut off the second dragon vein and bring it back. This way the curse on the national fortune will still be effective. Once we obtain that fragment, we can destroy the reincarnation laws of the Great Xia and curse their national fortune. Even if all the Great Xia gods come out, they will not be able to turn the situation around. We will obey the sun's holy decree. The rain goddess Tefnut, the earth god Geb, the sky god Nut, and the life goddess Isis all bowed in acceptance. One more thing, the vague figure spoke again. The news that the Great Xia gods cannot act was tested with Osiris's life. This information must not be known to other divine nations. Otherwise, if many divine nations act simultaneously, the Great Xia will be divided. The entire Great Xia can only belong to us. But our actions against the Great Xia will definitely attract the attention of other divine nations. What if they intervene? Tefnut asked. They have already been frightened by the Great Xia gods, the vague figure sneered. Unless they truly confirm that the Great Xia gods cannot act, They will not rashly intervene. But by the time they realize this, the Great Xia will already be in our grasp. Chapter 533, Walkie-Talkie. Shangjing City. Headquarters of the Night Watchers. The crisp ringtone of a mobile phone echoed in the office, drawing everyone's attention. Yi Fan, sitting at the center of the conference table, furrowed his brow and glanced at his phone, a look of confusion appearing in his eyes. After pondering for a moment, Yi Fan picked up his phone and slowly stood up. This meeting has already lasted 9 hours. It's time to reach a final conclusion. I believe I have made the stakes very clear. Let's proceed directly to the final vote. Yi Fan's gaze swept over the crowd as he calmly spoke. Regarding the Supreme Commander of the Night Watchers, Yi Fan, whether he possesses absolute command, control and resource mobilization rights over all living combat forces of the Night Watchers in the upcoming Great Xia crisis, we will now hold the final vote. In the silent conference room, the other 7 senior members of the Night Watchers pondered for a moment before slowly raising their hands. 5 votes in favor, 1 against, 1 abstention. Yi Fan nodded slightly and said in a deep voice, "In that case, for the time being, I will take full control of the Night Watchers. All personnel and resources must unconditionally comply with my arrangements. The meeting is adjourned." Yi Fan walked out of the conference room with his phone and documents, heading to the corner window on this floor to answer the call. "Hello. Commander Yi, this is Lin Chia." The voice on the other end was Lin Chia. Yi Fan looked up at the time. "You should have arrived in Shangjing by now, right?" "We're here." The 006 team stationed in Shangjing still has many matters to handle. You can freely move around Shangjing for a day, and tomorrow morning we will hold the final confrontation. As for the format of the confrontation, the 006 team should send someone to notify you. "Commander Yi, I didn't call for that." Yi Fan raised an eyebrow. "Then what is it about?" "I want to know where Sword Saint has gone." Yi Fan froze in place. "Why are you asking this?" "For certain reasons, I have received a premonition about his future." Lin Chia paused before speaking solemnly. "His situation is very dangerous. He might die." Yi Fan's hand trembled as he held the phone, his pupils constricting, standing like a statue. After a long silence, he slowly spoke. "He is lost in the fog." "Fog?" Lin Chia's voice rose slightly. "Why would he go into the fog?" Yi Fan briefly recounted the events over the phone. "Wind God and Ta County Fengdu fog." Lin Chia murmured. "How long has he been there?" 32 hours. Lin Chia pondered for a moment. "Commander Yi, can we postpone the final assessment?" "Postpone the assessment?" Yi Fan frowned. "And then what? Do you want to go into the fog to rescue the Sword Saint?" "And Ta County has been in the fog for 32 hours. Do you know where it is now? Even if you know its location, how will you survive in the fog? How will you catch up to it? Do you think your speed can surpass that of the Sword Saint? And after catching up, what can you do with your strength to help him?" Lin Chia was left speechless. "This matter is far more complicated than you think. It doesn't just involve a city. The implications of this situation concern the safety of the entire Great Xia. Don't say you are not a special team yet. Even if you have become a special team, you may not have the ability to get involved." Yi Fan's voice was extremely serious. "You are not the top combat power of Great Xia. You are the seeds of the top combat power. And seeds represent the future. What you need to do now is to grow under our protection. One day you will replace us and become the shield of the entire Great Xia. But that is not now." Yi Fan hung up the phone. He took a deep breath, slowly exhaling, his gaze falling on the city outside the window, his expression complex. Zhuo Qing, who had been silently standing beside him, sighed. "Although what you said makes sense, your tone was a bit harsh." Yi Fan stared out the window for a long time before shaking his head. "I just don't want them to follow in the footsteps of Team Blue Rain. They are too young. Regardless, you have obtained the absolute command you wanted." Zhuo Qing shrugged. "Are you really confident?" "Perhaps." Yi Fan said lightly. "Right now, Great Xia has no other choice." "What about Zhou Ping? Do you trust Zhou Ping?" Zhuo Qing was taken aback. "He is the Sword Saint. Of course I trust him, but then do you trust me?" Yi Fan turned to look at Zhuo Qing, his eyes filled with unprecedented seriousness. "I trust you." Zhuo Qing did not hesitate at all. "Good. Yifan nodded slightly. Then follow my orders. There is no need to mobilize any combat power to rescue Zhou Ping. But what if? Yifan shot him a glance and Zhuqing obediently closed his mouth. You go to the central control room and send a message to Guan, telling him to release immediately. Notify all human top-tier fighters except Zhou Ping to head to the Great Xiao border immediately. Additionally, wake up Special Team 001. Yifan issued several commands in succession, his expression extremely serious. Zhuqing's expression changed slightly upon hearing the last command. Has the situation become this serious? It concerns the fate of the nation. We must prepare in advance. Understood. Zhuqing nodded and quickly walked away. Once Zhuqing left, Yifan stood still for a moment as if contemplating something. Finally, he seemed to have made a decision and stepped toward the other end of the corridor. He pushed open the door to the Supreme Commander's office, walked in, locked the door behind him and sat down in the office chair. He bent down, took out a key from his pocket, inserted it into the keyhole of the bottom drawer of the desk, turned it gently and opened it. Inside the drawer was a palm-sized mini-safe. He placed the safe on the desk, entered a 12-digit password, and with a soft click the safe popped open automatically. He took out a walkie-talkie from the safe. This walkie-talkie was not large, but its design was quite unique. From the outside, it looked like it was made up of tiny pixel blocks. Rather than a walkie-talkie, it was more appropriate to describe it as a Lego-like construction. Yifan adjusted the walkie-talkie slightly and a crackling sound came from it. This pixel-style walkie-talkie was surprisingly functional. He gently pressed the talk button. The red indicator light lit up. Yifan held the walkie-talkie in his hand, paused for a moment and slowly spoke. The favor you owe me is due now. Chapter 534. Coordinates. Inside the car there was an eerie silence. The sounds of horns and engines from the street could be heard, but they failed to penetrate the car's interior at all. With its almost abnormal noise cancellation and shock absorption capabilities, the cabin felt completely isolated from the outside world. Lin Chia and the others sat on the sofa, lost in silence. How is this possible? Bai Li Pangpang frowned deeply. He is the sword saint of Daxiao, a being who can stand shoulder to shoulder with the gods. How could he? Standing shoulder to shoulder with the gods doesn't mean invincible, and Qingyu, sitting nearby, slowly spoke up. The situation beyond the fog is already beyond human control. Although the sword saint can take on a god one-on-one, who can guarantee that there is only one god in the fog? Are you saying he might be attacked by multiple gods? Lin Chia's expression turned grave. Just my speculation, and Qingyu adjusted his glasses. After all, there aren't many beings in this world that can threaten the sword saint. In a one-on-one situation, even if the sword saint can't defeat his opponent, he can still retreat unharmed, unless there's more than one god involved. What should we do then? There's nothing we can do. At least we can't do anything. Are we just going to do nothing? Bai Li Pangpang grew anxious. That's the sword saint. He's the one who helps us clean and wash dishes every day, the one who brought us all the way here. He has done so much for us and now he's in danger and we're just supposed to wait here. As Bai Li Pangpang's words fell, the entire cabin fell silent. Lin Chia remained silent for a long time before sighing. But Commander Yi is right. We don't know the location of that city in the fog. We have no means to protect ourselves in the fog, and that city is flying in the sky. Even if we ride the Earth Dragon, we might not be able to catch up to it. And Qingyu seemed to think of something, his eyes narrowing slightly. Actually, we can find out the location of that city. Everyone turned to look at him simultaneously. How? Lin Chia asked. And Qingyu adjusted his glasses again. Chia, do you remember the formation you drew with the blood of worker ants in the primitive forest outside Fingdu? Lin Chia was taken aback. The dimensional summoning formation? That's the one, and Qingyu nodded. While you were drawing it, I was using the only correct answer to analyze that formation. I found that it essentially serves as an anchor point that can communicate with multiple spaces. Exactly. Lin Chia had inherited all the knowledge of summoning magic, so he naturally understood the principle of the dimensional summoning formation. That magical array essentially acted as an anchor for Lin Chia's soul. When his soul drifted between various planes, it connected his soul to his body. Only in this way could Lin Chia wander through multiple planes and sign contracts with summoned entities, allowing him to recall their souls again. In simple terms, that formation could serve as a coordinate. As long as we draw an identical formation somewhere else to resonate with the anchor point, in the primitive forest, I can reverse engineer the spatial coordinates of that formation, and Qingyu said calmly. Lin Chia's brows furrowed tightly. But the problem is, these two formations must be exactly the same. When I drew that formation, the blood of the worker ants automatically spread outwards, causing slight deviations in the coordinates of the magical array. If we can't perfectly restore these deviations, the two magical arrays won't resonate. Lin Chia's expression was somewhat helpless. At that time I didn't pay attention to those details. I did, and Qingyu smiled, his eyes behind the lenses glowing faintly gray. I can perfectly replicate it. The hearts of the group stirred slightly. So, does that mean we can find the location of that city now? Shen Qingzhu pondered. But how do we get there? How to move through the fog and catch up to that city was a crucial question. When this question was posed to Lin Chia and the others, the cabin fell silent once more. In the fog, modern electronic devices couldn't function properly, and it was impossible to fly through the fog to find that city. The flame pulse Earth Dragon could move underground, but once it emerged, the fog would envelop them again. They simply had no means to do so. Just as everyone was deep in thought, Lin Chia's phone suddenly rang. He glanced at the screen and saw an unfamiliar number. After hesitating for a moment, he answered the call. Hello. Instructor Yuan? Lin Chia exclaimed in surprise. Hearing those three words, Chao Yuan, Bai Li Pangpang, Shen Qingzhu, and Jiang Er all turned to look at him. Yeah, okay. After a brief conversation, Lin Chia hung up the phone. He looked at the others and slowly spoke. Instructor Yuan said to meet him for dinner soon. Instructor Yuan is great. He knows we've come to Beijing and even specially invited us to dinner, unlike some people with the last names Yi and Zhua, Bai Li Pangpang said lazily. Originally, meeting with the chief instructor of the training camp and having a meal together was something to be happy about. But with such an incident occurring, everyone's spirits were not very high. Should we go? Jiang Er's voice came from the MP3. Of course. It's been a long time since we've seen Instructor Yuan. Since we're in Beijing, we should definitely go, Lin Chia paused. Besides, he's the chief instructor of the Night Watchman's new recruits, which means he's somewhat of a high-ranking official. He might be able to help us. Everyone's eyes immediately lit up. In the evening, Lin Chia and the others changed into casual clothes and walked to a bustling snack street. This is where Instructor Yuan is meeting us? Bai Li Pangpang stood on tiptoe looking into the distance. Isn't this just a snack street? Yes, that's right. Lin Chia confirmed the address again and nodded. What's wrong with the snack street? Jia Lan sniffed the fragrant air, her eyes sparkling. I think it smells great. To avoid unnecessary misunderstandings, and Qingyu left Jiang Er's body in the car. Fortunately, this snack street wasn't long and was still within the coverage of the magnetic field, so Jiang Er hid on the MP3 at Qingyu's waist, secretly observing the surroundings. The group walked along the snack street until they stopped in front of a small shop called King of Barbecue. At the long table outside the barbecue shop, a familiar figure waved at them. Over here. This was the first time Lin Chia and the others saw Yuan Gang in casual clothes. Even in a loose knit sweater, Instructor Yuan's solid muscles were hard to conceal, and his upright posture made him easily noticeable in a crowd. Chapter 535. The Forbidden Realm of the Sword Saint. Instructor Yuan. Hello, Instructor Yuan. Instructor Yuan, what happened to the Rolex I gave you before? Why aren't you wearing it today? Yuan Gang's mouth twitched slightly. You little fatty, how dare you bring up that Rolex? You secretly stuffed it into my pocket and I almost got a reprimand because of it. Bai Li Pangpang laughed carelessly and everyone took their seats in turn. Yuan Gang shouted towards the barbecue shop behind him, and soon, plates of barbecue were brought out from the shop. Instructor Yuan, I didn't expect you to like this kind of food. Lin Chia asked curiously. Yuan Gang smiled. After being a soldier for so long, I've come to enjoy the lively atmosphere of eating like this. The ambience of high-end restaurants makes me feel uncomfortable. Unless necessary, I generally don't go to those places. Exactly. Why go to fancy restaurants? Isn't barbecue delicious? Bailey Pang Pang chimed in. Chow Yuan silently rolled his eyes at Bailey Pang Pang, the fence-sitter. Yuan Gang pulled out some beers from a box and handed them to everyone while he sighed. You little rascals, when you first entered the training camp, you were just clueless kids, especially you, the money-spending fatty and the rebellious Shin Qingzhu. You two were simply the nightmares of that batch of instructors. Every time I saw you I got angry. Shin Qingzhu took the beer bottle, smiled awkwardly and pulled out a cigarette from his pocket. Instructor Yuan, want one? I don't smoke. Yuan Gang waved his hand. You should stay away from this stuff too. You're all going to be special team members. You shouldn't be messing around every day. Shin Qingzhu silently tossed the cigarette pack into the trash can. Who would have thought that in just 2 years, you'd already be qualified to challenge our team? Yuan Gang said with a smile. Thanks to your excellent teaching. Bailey Pang Pang threw in another compliment. Where's Jiang Air? Yuan Gang looked around. Isn't she in your team too? Hello, Instructor Yuan. A girl's voice came from the MP3 on the table and Yuan Gang froze in place. He only had the list of the 5th Reserve team members but didn't have any information about them, so he was not familiar with Jiang Air's situation. The others briefly explained Jiang Air's situation, of course, omitting the bloody parts, but after Yuan Gang listened he still fell into silence. Jiang Air. After a long while, Yuan Gang finally spoke slowly, wanting to comfort Jiang Air. At that moment the girl's light laughter came from the MP3. Instructor Yuan, you don't need to worry about me. I'm doing well now. At least I'm much freer than before and can do many things I couldn't do before. By the way, who is that 2916336D Li Xiaomei you have pinned on WeChat? Yuan Gang's expression suddenly froze. The expressions of everyone became subtle. Just a friend. Just a friend. Yuan Gang quietly took a sip of beer, trying to brush it off. Everyone burst into laughter, eating the fragrant barbecue on the table and chatting about the interesting things from these years as time passed little by little. Finally, Lin Chia put down the beer bottle in his hand. Instructor Yuan, how much do you know about the Sword Saint? Yuan Gang was slightly taken aback. I know a bit. I've met him twice. Apart from not liking to communicate with people, I don't know much about his personality. What else? Anything else? Yuan Gang thought for a moment. I also attended a meeting related to him once. A meeting? Lin Chia and the others exchanged glances. What meeting? It was a meeting with several experts on the Forbidden Ruins and some high-level night watchers to discuss the Sword Saint's Forbidden Ruins. We assessed his Forbidden Ruins and named it, agreeing on the sequence of the Forbidden Ruins. The Sword Saint's Forbidden Ruins? Everyone immediately became interested. What exactly is the Sword Saint's Forbidden Ruins? Chow Yuan couldn't help but ask. Yuan Gang looked at them suspiciously. He's been your teacher for a few months, and you don't even know what his Forbidden Ruins are? Lin Chia and the others shook their heads. It's not that we didn't want to ask. It's just that he doesn't even know what his Forbidden Ruins are. No wonder. Yuan Gang nodded, seemingly not surprised by this. The Sword Saint's Forbidden Ruins is a unique existence in human history. It has never appeared before, and this Forbidden Ruins is quite peculiar. Peculiar? Lin Chia asked curiously upon hearing this description. What does peculiar mean? The strength of this Forbidden Ruins is not determined by the Forbidden Ruins itself but by the owner. If you say it's weak, it can still create a Sword Saint. If you say it's strong, it seems to have no substantial lethality. In fact, we're not even sure if the Sword Saint really has a Forbidden Ruins. Yuan Gang paused and slowly said. His Forbidden Ruins is of sequence 333, Glazed Heart of a Child. Sequence 333? That's too low, right? Bailey Pong Pong's eyes widened. That's why this Forbidden Ruins is so peculiar. Yuan Gang nodded. The only function of this Forbidden Ruins is to make a person's mind and thoughts as pure as glass, free of any impurities, not lying, not doing evil and not harboring evil thoughts, allowing them to fully immerse themselves in whatever they do. Do you know how the Sword Saint learned to wield a sword? By reading novels, everyone answered in unison. Exactly, by reading novels. When he reads novels, he subconsciously immerses himself in the role without any reservations, allowing himself to become the character and experience everything depicted in the book in another world. Although these experiences are fictional, in his world they are real. He reads the book as a participant, feeling the joys and sorrows of each character. And among all these characters, his favorite is the sword cultivator. The sword is clear, pure, gentle yet powerful. Just like him. Yuan Gang took a sip of beer and continued. Thus he began to immerse himself in the role of the sword cultivator in the book, experiencing their every moment of joy and vengeance, every despair, every breakthrough in battle and every moment of dedicated cultivation. Although the sword techniques and sword energies recorded in the book are fictional, he truly comprehended the essence of the sword, which is intention. Through the snippets in the book he created various sword techniques and realized sword energy, subtly relying on a clear sword heart, breaking through to become the pinnacle of humanity. If it weren't for a mysterious entity from the sea realm suddenly appearing in Shijin City a few years ago, which he casually killed with a sword, perhaps the Night Watchers would never have discovered that such a genius was hidden in an ordinary local restaurant. Chapter 536. Let me be the Sword Saint. However, the side effects of this forbidden market are also quite obvious, Yuan Gang continued. Side effects. Lin Chia frowned slightly. It was the first time he had heard that the forbidden market had side effects. The glazed innocent heart grants him the purest of souls. He will never interpret others' thoughts with malice, which makes him easily gullible. In modern society, such innocence is not necessarily a good thing. As the saying goes, good people are often taken advantage of. Because of his excessive kindness and naivety, he was deceived, used, and bullied repeatedly during his childhood. Pranks, scams, borrowing money, slander, rumors, he has basically experienced all forms of bullying you can think of. Eventually, he couldn't even finish middle school and was forced to drop out. His parents were addicted to gambling and racked up a mountain of debt. Eventually, they abandoned little Zhou Ping and secretly fled to the north. Those chasing the debts came knocking, but fortunately his third uncle found him in time, rescued him from the debt collectors and took him back to his own restaurant. Later, the homeless Zhou Ping stayed by his third uncle's side. His third uncle treated him well, carefully raising him. Eventually, he began helping out in the restaurant as a way to repay his uncle and earn a little pocket money for himself. As Yuan Gang's words fell, Lin Chia and the others fell into silence. How can people be so wicked? Jia Lan slammed a fist on the table, nearly flipping it over. If it were an ordinary person after experiencing so much, their temperament would have changed drastically. They might seek revenge on society, sink into darkness, or become extremely selfish, thus going down a wrong path. But Zhou Ping wouldn't. He felt wronged and distressed. He couldn't understand why all this was happening. Yet his way of resisting this world was simply to seal away his wounded heart, no longer communicating with others, immersing himself wholeheartedly in beautiful and pure stories. He did not despair over this society, nor did he feel that the world was unfair. He simply learned to protect himself. So that's how the Sword Saint's social anxiety came about. Chao Yuan sighed deeply. When the realm of mental strength reaches a certain height, further progress requires a breakthrough in mindset. The emotional scars endured in his early years became the greatest obstacle for the Sword Saint's advancement, Yuan Gang slowly spoke. But Commander Yi always believed that he was the most likely person in the world to break through that ceiling. As long as he can leap over the hurdle in his heart and release the glazed innocent heart without reservation, his transparent and pure heart and sword will become the hope of the entire Great Xia. Bailey Pang Pang nodded thoughtfully. I'm also curious about one thing, he asked. Since the Sword Saint was already reclusive back then, how did Commander Yi get him to come out and become the Sword Saint of Great Xia? Upon hearing this question, Yuan Gang smiled slightly. I mentioned before, his world is very simple and pure. In the mist. Fragments of the city. In the dimly lit warm underground parking garage, Zhou Ping in a blood-stained black shirt, slowly walked over to the stove, carrying a frozen passerby on his back. Cough, cough, cough. He coughed violently a few times, his brow slightly furrowed. He bent down and gently placed the passerby next to the stove. He extended his trembling right hand and tested for a moment under the passerby's nose. He let out a sigh of relief. Senior Sword Saint, this is the last batch, Lu Yu said, carrying another unconscious passerby and placing them by the stove, then turned to Zhou Ping. Have all the streets been searched? Completed. Zhou Ping nodded. He stepped to the corner of the garage, his steps a bit unsteady, leaning against a pillar and slowly sitting down. His right hand was still trembling slightly. His eyes reflected the flickering flames in the dim parking lot, lost in thought. After a long while his eyes gently closed. Time passed and faint voices came from a distance. Zhou Ping frowned, struggling to open his eyes. Bloodshot veins clung to his eyes, making him look extremely haggard. In another corner of the parking lot, a pale Chen Han approached Zhou Ping with 3 children aged 7 or 8. Zhou Ping looked at the 3 children, surprise flickering in his eyes. My mental strength is limited and I can't heal everyone for now, so I saved the children first, Chen Han said weakly. These 3 children seem to have good talent. They managed to shake off the influence of the wind and have awakened. Lu Yu, you and the Sword Saint should take care of these 3 children. Understood. Lu Yu quickly walked over to the 3 children. After Chen Han rested for a moment, he walked toward the other side of the garage. The 3 children, 2 boys and 1 girl, were dressed in thick, warm clothing. Perhaps they had been outside for too long, their cheeks were flushed and their lips slightly purple, but their eyes remained bright like stars. What are your names? Yu asked. I'm Li Rudi, the girl said softly. I'm Wang Jiaqing. Chen Nan. The 3 children glanced at the unconscious passers-by nearby, seemingly a bit frightened. Big brother, are you also a night watchman? Li Rudi asked curiously, her eyes sparkling like jewels. Do you know about night watchmen? Lu Yu asked in surprise. The older brother just told us, Wang Jiaqing replied. He said night watchmen are superheroes who protect us. Lu Yu smiled. Then I am indeed a night watchman. What about you, big brother? Li Rudi looked at Zhou Ping, who was huddled in the corner. Zhou Ping paused, his voice hoarse. I'm not a night watchman. Although he's not a night watchman, he's a superhero even more powerful than a night watchman, Lu Yu patiently explained to the children. He is the Sword Saint of our great Xia. Sword Saint. The children's mouths fell open in astonishment. Chen Nan stared at Zhou Ping for a long time, tentatively asking, Big brother, can you turn invisible and use sword blade storms? Foolish Chen Nan, he's not the Sword Saint from the game. Li Rudi corrected. Oh. The Sword Saint of Great Xia sounds really impressive. Wang Jiaqing looked at Zhou Ping with admiration in his eyes. Sword Saint brother, how did you become the Sword Saint? Can I also become a Sword Saint in the future? Zhou Ping stood frozen in place. His gaze was fixed on the 3 children, but his thoughts had already drifted back many years. It was an ordinary afternoon. Zhou Ping rolled up his sleeves, sitting on the steps of his 3rd uncle's restaurant, diligently washing vegetables. A man draped in a dark red cloak sat beside him. Zhou Ping focused on washing the vegetables and didn't notice his presence at all. The man stared at him for a long time, then smiled. Are you Zhou Ping? Zhou Ping looked up, wiped the sweat from his forehead with his wrist and nodded. My name is Yi Fan, the man said. Oh. Zhou Ping glanced at him and continued washing the vegetables. Yi Fan paused. Do you want to be the pinnacle of humanity? What is the pinnacle of humanity? It means being the one who can hold up the sky when it falls. Yi Fan pointed at the sky above. I don't understand. It means protecting this country and its people, the strongest among humans. Yi Fan explained in simple terms. Zhou Ping thought for a moment. Like a hero? Exactly like a hero. Zhou Ping pondered. Being a hero sounds good, but I don't like the name Pinnacle of Humanity. It's not imposing enough. Then what do you want to be called? Zhou Ping lowered his head, shook the water off his hands and glanced at the wooden sword on the steps. Sword Saint, he said. If you let me be the Sword Saint of Great Xia, I'll agree to you.